What I'd say if they finally listened, how I'd explain myself more clearly, what proof I'd offer so they'd understand I wasn't the problem. One day, I realized I hadn't done that in months, not because I had closure, but because I had acceptance. Some families never apologize, some never reflect. Some will go to the end of their lives convinced they were right, and that you were ungrateful, cold, or difficult. Let them. Their belief doesn't get to define your peace. If you're listening to this while sitting alone late at night, driving with the radio off, washing dishes and thinking too much, wondering if you were wrong to walk away, let me tell you something clearly. You weren't wrong. You were finished. I never asked my parents for money. But what I really refused to ask for was permission to exist without shrinking. And if that resonates with you, then this story was never just about me. It was about all of us who learned, late, quietly, painfully, that love shouldn't cost your dignity. Wherever you are right now, take a breath. You survived something that never gets talked about. And you're allowed to build a life that doesn't include the people who couldn't love you without conditions. That's not cruelty. Time does something strange when you finally stop fighting it. It doesn't erase the past. It just removes its grip. I don't replay old conversations anymore. Not the ones where I tried to explain myself. Not the ones where I stayed quiet to keep the peace. Not even the ones where I wondered what I could have done differently. That chapter doesn't ask for revisions. It's complete. Every now and then, someone asks me if I regret not reconciling. I think about that carefully. Regret only exists when you believe something better was possible with the same people. I don't believe that anymore. What I believe in now is alignment. My life is quieter than it used to be. Not smaller, not lonelier. Just quieter in the way that happens when you stop bracing for impact. I sleep better. I make decisions without anxiety. I celebrate wins without scanning the room for disapproval. That kind of freedom doesn't come from money. It comes from letting go. If my parents think about me, I hope they remember this. I didn't disappear to punish them. I didn't succeed to spite them. I didn't build a life to prove anything. I simply stopped waiting. And if you are listening to this, if you're wondering whether you're strong enough to choose yourself, whether it's too late, whether peace is worth the distance, let me answer that for you. Yes. Yes. And always, yes. You don't need permission to outgrow pain. You don't need consensus to walk away. And you don't need witnesses to live well. Sometimes the most powerful ending is the one that happens quietly, after everyone else has stopped watching. That's clarity. If this series felt personal, subscribe. This channel is for people who chose peace when chaos felt familiar. And if you want to say something, even just, I understand, the comments are open. You were never too much. They just couldn't meet you where you grew. Just steadiness. One afternoon, I ran into an old family friend at the grocery store. She smiled warmly, lowered her voice. I heard you and your parents aren't speaking, she said carefully. I nodded. She hesitated, then added, That must be hard. I thought about it, and for the first time, I answered honestly. It used to be, I said, but not anymore. Here's something no one prepares you for. When you stop being available for mistreatment, some people don't miss you. They miss the version of you that made them comfortable. That realization hurt. Then it healed me. My parents still tell their version of the story. I'm sure in their telling, they're the victims. They always were. But I don't correct it, because the people who matter can see the difference between distance and dignity. I used to believe family was something you endured. Now I know better. Family, real family, doesn't punish growth, doesn't resent independence, doesn't demand proof of loyalty through sacrifice. And if it does, you're allowed to leave, even quietly, even permanently. I didn't win because I had $14.6 million. I won because I stopped shrinking, because I didn't chase explanations, because I didn't beg to be understood. I chose peace over proximity, and that choice changed everything. If you're listening to this and wondering whether it's okay to walk away, it is. You don't owe anyone access to the life you built alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is live well, without an audience. Every once in a while, I hear about them. Not directly, never directly. It comes through secondhand channels, the way old family stories always do. A cousin mentions my mother's health in passing. An aunt hints that my father has slowed down. Someone always adds, they still talk about you. I believe it. People don't easily let go of the child they thought they owned. They know where I live. They know how to reach me. What they don't have anymore is access, not to my decisions, not to my finances, not to my peace, and certainly not to the life I built without their approval. I used to imagine what it would feel like if they finally apologized. A real apology. One without conditions, one without revision. Now, I don't think about it much at all. Closure doesn't always arrive as a conversation. Sometimes it arrives as indifference. On quiet mornings, I sit by the window with my coffee and think about the girl I used to be. The one who tried to earn love by being agreeable, the one who believed success had to be shared to be valid, the one who thought family meant endurance. I wish I could tell her this. You don't have to prove anything. Not your worth, not your loyalty, not your pain. I never asked my parents for money. What I asked for, silently, for years, was permission to live fully. They never gave it. So I gave it to myself. If they ever do reach out again, I know exactly what I'll say. Nothing cruel, nothing dramatic, just the truth. I'm doing well, and I hope you are too, because that's the final boundary. Kindness without access, peace without proximity, a life that no longer needs their understanding. If you're listening to this and standing at a similar crossroads, let me tell you something important. Walking away doesn't mean you failed. It means you chose yourself. And sometimes, that's the most successful thing you'll ever do. If you've stayed with me this long, I want to speak to you directly now. Not as a narrator, not as a character, as someone who has stood where you might be standing. There's a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when you realize something has shifted. It's not during an argument, not during a confrontation, not even during a dramatic goodbye. It's when you stop explaining yourself and notice you don't miss the explanation. That's when you know you've crossed over. I used to rehearse conversations in my head, but this time they weren't in control, and they could feel it. My attorney laid out the documents slowly, carefully, every account fully protected, every attempt logged, every overstep documented. My father's jaw tightened. My mother whispered, "We were just trying to help." My attorney didn't even look at them. "Any further contact regarding her finances," she said evenly, "will be considered harassment." That's when it finally landed. They weren't advisors, they weren't stakeholders, they were outsiders. My father turned to me, anger leaking through the cracks. "So that's it?" he asked. "You're cutting us off?" I folded my hands. "No," I said. "You did that years ago." Silence. Real silence this time. My mother's voice softened. "Too late. We're still your parents." I met her eyes. "And I'm still the daughter you didn't invest in." She flinched. "Good." I stood up. This wasn't dramatic. It was finished. "I never asked you for money," I said. "I never asked for credit. And I never asked for permission." I paused at the door. "But you taught me something valuable," I added. "You taught me how to survive without you." I don't hear much from them now. Occasional messages, holiday guilt, carefully worded regrets that never quite reach accountability. I read them. Then I delete them. People ask me sometimes if the money changed me. It didn't. What changed me was realizing I could build everything they said I couldn't and still walk away without asking for approval. I didn't win by humiliating them. I won by becoming untouchable. And that smile they still remember, it wasn't revenge. It was relief. People think the story ends when you walk out of the room. It doesn't. That's just when the noise stops and the consequences begin. The first holiday came quietly. No dinner invitation, no carefully staged family photo. Just a text from my mother at 6:42 a.m. "We miss you." No apology, no acknowledgement, just grief without accountability. I stared at the screen for a long time, then set my phone face down and went on with my day. What surprised me wasn't how little I missed them. It was how much lighter everything felt without the constant evaluation. No one measuring my success, no one minimizing it, no one rewriting my story to make themselves comfortable. Peace is expensive, but I could finally afford it. Months later, I heard through relatives that my parents had changed the narrative. They always do. Now the story was that I had changed, that money had gone to my head, that I had become cold. I didn't correct them. Let them believe it. It was easier than explaining that boundaries feel cruel to people who benefited from your silence. My brother tried once. A friendly message, a casual tone. "Maybe we should talk," he wrote. "They're not doing well." I typed, deleted, typed again, then sent one sentence. I'm doing exactly as well as I was when they stopped worrying about me. He never replied. Here's the truth no one tells you. Family doesn't always want you to succeed. They want you to succeed just enough to stay beneath them. And when you rise anyway, they call it betrayal. I still don't ask them for money. I never did. What I asked for, without realizing it, was permission to be small. And the moment I stopped asking, everything changed. If you're listening to this, and you've ever been the responsible one, the overlooked one, the one who succeeded quietly, let me tell you something they never will. You don't owe anyone access to the life they refuse to support. Sometimes the real revenge isn't confrontation. It's peace they can't reach. People still think this story is about money. It isn't. Money was just the proof. A year passed, then another. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became honest. I built routines that didn't revolve around approval, friendships that didn't feel conditional, a home that stayed quiet even when I succeeded. No tension waiting for the other shoe to drop, no guilt for doing well. How you've been managing, she replied, forcing a smile. We were worried you were struggling. There it was. Concern, retroactively applied. My father leaned forward. You should have told us. I met his eyes. Why? He blinked, caught off guard. We're your parents, he said. We deserve to know. Deserve. That word did a lot of work in their world. My mother sighed dramatically. You know, we could have helped you manage this properly. I almost laughed. You mean like how you managed my brother's finances? I asked. Her face tightened. That's different. Of course it was. They started speaking in hypotheticals almost immediately. Tax planning, family trusts, legacy considerations. My father even said, money like this should stay in the family. I set my glass down gently. It is, I said. With me. That's when my mother snapped. How dare you hide this from us, she hissed. After everything we've done for you? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just asked one question. What exactly have you done for me? They stared, so I helped them. You didn't pay for my education, I said. You didn't help when you kicked me out. You didn't ask how I survived. You told people I was barely getting by. My father opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother looked wounded. That's not fair. I smiled again. It's accurate. That's when the mask dropped. My father's voice hardened. You wouldn't have had the discipline to build this without how we raised you. Ah, there it was. Ownership. My success had suddenly become their achievement. You owe us, my mother said quietly. And just like that. They stopped pretending this was about love. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. I've been waiting for this conversation, I said. They stiffened. I showed them screenshots, messages, emails, notes I'd saved over the years, comments they'd made, decisions they'd justified, proof of exactly how disposable I'd been. My father's face drained of color. My mother whispered, Why would you keep this? I tilted my head. Because I knew one day you'd want something from me. Then I delivered the line they never saw coming. I never asked you for money, I said, and I never will. My father stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. You're being selfish, he snapped. This isn't how family works. I stayed seated. No, I said softly. This is exactly how our family works. They left angry, not heartbroken, not regretful. Angry, because the child they dismissed had become the one they couldn't control. But the real shock, it hadn't even happened yet, because 2 weeks later, they made a move that proved they hadn't learned a thing. And that's when I stopped being polite. 2 weeks passed, no calls, no apologies, no sudden self-reflection, just silence. I knew better than to trust it. In my family, silence was never peace. It was planning. The first sign came from my bank, a polite email, neutral language. We've received an inquiry requesting confirmation of beneficiary alignment related to your accounts. I stared at the screen. Beneficiary alignment? That wasn't casual curiosity. That was intent. I made one phone call, then another. By the end of the day, I knew exactly what they had tried to do. They had contacted an attorney, their attorney, claiming they were concerned about my well-being, that they feared I was being financially manipulated, that they wanted to protect family assets, assets that had never belonged to them. My mother had even suggested, gently of course, that I might be overwhelmed and in need of guidance. Guidance. The same people who had kicked me out without a plan. Now worried I couldn't handle success. That night my father called, straight to voicemail, then my mother, then both of them together, calling back to back like persistence might wear me down. I didn't answer. Instead, I scheduled a meeting. We sat in a conference room 3 days later. Same parents, same expressions. I never asked my parents for money. Not once. Not when I was struggling. Not when I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor. Not even when they kicked me out of their house and told me, "You'll figure it out, or you won't." I learned early that asking them for anything came with strings. Invisible ones. Tight ones. Ones that wrapped around your throat later. So I stopped asking. What I didn't expect was how angry they'd be years later when they realized I never needed them at all. Growing up, my parents had a very clear idea of who I was. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who didn't cause trouble, didn't demand attention, and didn't need much. That last part became their favorite story. At family dinners, my mother would smile at relatives and say, "She's low maintenance, always has been." What she really meant was, I didn't require investment. My older brother, on the other hand, was a risk taker, which was a polite way of saying he needed constant bailouts, rent money, car payments, business ideas that never quite became businesses. They poured into him without hesitation. With me, they offered advice. I moved out at 22 with 2 suitcases and a job they barely understood. "What exactly do you do again?" my father asked, already half distracted by his phone. "I work with data," I said. He nodded like that confirmed everything he already believed. Data sounded small, safe, unimportant. They never asked how much I made. They never asked if I was okay. And I didn't volunteer the information, because every time I succeeded quietly, something in me felt safer. Things changed the night they kicked me out. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no slammed doors. Just my mother standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, saying, "We think it's time you learned how the real world works. Without us." I remember looking around that house, the one I grew up in, and realizing I had already been living without them for years. I packed my things calmly. No tears, no begging. That seemed to bother them more than anything. The next few years were quiet. I worked. I saved. I learned how to move through the world without announcing myself. When my parents talked to relatives, they told them I was doing okay, which in their language meant barely scraping by. I heard that later, of course. I always heard things later. Then came the dinner. The one that changed everything. They invited me out of nowhere. A nice restaurant, white tablecloths, polite smiles. My mother hugged me a little too tightly. My father watched me like he was solving a puzzle. Halfway through the meal, my mother sighed and said, "You know, we worry about you." There it was. She leaned in. "You don't ever ask us for help." I smiled. "I know." My father frowned. "Well, how are you managing?" I hesitated just long enough. "Fine," I said. That's when my mother reached across the table, picked up a folder, my folder, and slid it toward herself. "I was helping your cousin with some paperwork," she said casually. And your name came up. She opened it. And everything changed. Her smile vanished. My father went completely still. They stared at the number on the page like it was a foreign language. Then my mother looked up at me and whispered, "How dare you hide this from us?" I didn't answer. I just smiled. And that's when I realized they weren't upset I had money. They were furious that I didn't need them to get it. The number sat between us like a live wire. $14,600,000. No commas missing. No decimals misunderstood. My mother's fingers trembled as she traced it, like if she touched it long enough it might change. My father cleared his throat. Once, twice. "That can't be right," he said finally. I took a sip of water. Calm. Measured. "It is." The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was calculation. My mother recovered first. "Well," she said slowly, folding her hands, "this explains a lot." I raised an eyebrow. "What does?"